Welcome to the Farmstead Revival. I'm Janelle Anderson, and I am joined here by my co-host, who happens to be my littlest sister, Trudi Skedsvold. Welcome to this week's podcast. We can't wait to dive in. We are doing the second part of our Roots Run Deep, laying a little bit of the foundation of who we are. All right, here we go. We are going to be diving back into a bit of our story and how we grew up, and it shaped the way that Trudi and I not only run our farms, but live our lives and our priorities and all of that kind of stuff. So last week, on the last podcast that we did, we talked a little bit about, or a lot about, our lifestyle and how we grew up. One of the things I mentioned was that beautiful log cabin that we grew up in that my parents built with their two hands, as well as bringing in some of the neighbors and community members to help at different points of it. Well, when I was a senior in high school, about a month before I graduated, it was April 18th, our house caught on fire and burned down.
I don't know if it was really caught on fire.
Right.
Technically, it was something inside the house that started the fire.
Yeah, there was a fire that started in it, and it ended up destroying the whole house. It was not salvageable at all.
And sadly, our parents were out of town when this all happened. Janelle technically was in charge.
Which is scary. No, just kidding.
Yeah, Janelle being in charge is really scary. I was in sixth grade. No, sorry, fourth grade. I don't know why I said sixth grade. I was in fourth grade, and I remember getting called to the office. I came down to the office, and a good friend of ours, Stumpner, was there to pick me up. And I was just really like, why is he picking me up? Why isn't Janelle or Amanda picking me up? I was so confused. And so he started driving me, and we got closer to our house, and I looked up. And as I looked up, he said, Janelle called me, and I need to tell you something. And I said, oh, like, what's going on? And then I saw the smoke coming up, and he said, Janelle called and said that the house was on fire. And I immediately started bawling. And then I remember pulling up, and like, there's cars everywhere, like all over the road. And I got out of the car and I started walking down the driveway, and I remember Stumpner being like, no, she lives here. This is her house, like letting me go by. And so I started walking down the pathway towards the house. And then I saw you and Amanda coming running, and we started running towards each other. Like, we were all crying, and then we like embraced, and it was really like a hard moment for all of us, I feel. And then you could see the fire in the background. And then like my first thought was all of the animals, like, because we didn't know what had happened. But thankfully, the neighbors and the vet actually had come out too to make sure the animals were okay. The vet had checked them all over. The neighbors had gotten the horses in the barn and locked them up in the barn.
I remember them telling me that the horses were, of course, freaking out because of this fire that was going on. And they were far enough away they wouldn't have caught on fire, but they were close enough that it was very, like, it riled them up. And so they said they were so wild, but they did. They caught them and they locked them in the barn to keep them safe and secure. Mm-hmm. It's something I think that is forever ingrained in your mind, but my mind as well. And I'm sure we could talk to our sister who got to like see it, of how traumatic it was and how hard it was. Like, that was like a pivotal moment in my life. Like, that was really the first time I was hit with something that was so much bad.
And I think it was 10 times harder because our parents weren't there. I think you didn't have that adult to comfort you and tell you it was going to be okay. I mean, I had my sisters, but I wouldn't consider, like, you're comforting, but you're not my mom.
I totally get it. And I remember, we got the call at school. I called and set that up for someone to come get you. And my other sister, Amanda, we went to the same high school together. We were coming down the road before we could see anything. And I don't even know if we could see smoke at that point, but maybe we could. And I was like, maybe it's not as bad as what they said. Maybe they weren't fully explaining it to us. And we get past the corner of a line of trees where you can see down our big field, our pasture, and where our house should be way back in the end of it, there was nothing. Like, nothing. And that was the moment where I was like, oh my goodness, this is really bad. So we get up there to where, because of course we can't drive down our driveway. It's a fairly decent long driveway. And Amanda and I took off running towards it. And I have to tell you guys this because this is so traumatic, but this is something that makes me laugh. And I hope if my sister listens to this, she remembers it, and she probably won't laugh. I don't know. but I was running, like we were, I mean, obviously horrible, horrible moment. And I'm running and I look back just to catch my sister Amanda tripping as we're running. And I remember thinking in my head, oh my gosh, is she okay? And then we just she got up and we just took off running again towards the house. And I got to, and we met up with Trudi and we got close enough to the house, as close as they would let us go. And I remember sinking to my knees and just sobbing. And I think after that moment is the impact that it hit me of like, okay, now I'm in charge. What do? I'm the parent here. I was 17 years old at that point. I'm like, what do I do? And so we then went to a neighbor's house and we called my grandparents in Minnesota. I'll never forget that call, but we had to call information to even get their number. Like this was back before you had cell phones. So,
right.
And I didn't have like a little
or Google.
Yeah, I didn't have an address book where I could just look up their number, or I had it kept down. And so we had to call that and get their number and call them. And their reaction was my grandma's reaction. I'll never forget it. And then from there, we can go back and you can share a little more of your story. But from there, we went to Kmart in the local town because we had nothing. I actually had a track meet that day. And so I had my track suit, my track uniform on with my track sweatsuit over it. That's the only clothes that I had. And so we went to Kmart and a Red Cross person met us there and gave us gift cards so that we could buy some underwear and bras and a couple shirts and a couple pairs of pants, something to sleep in, and a few toiletries. And so for me, having to take that responsibility on to take you guys there and do that.
I literally don't even remember that. Like, I don't at all.
Yeah, it's crazy.
The one thing I do remember is our community and coming together and helping us. I mean, I know that like when the fire was happening, there was the neighbors that were getting the guns out of the half of the shop.
Yeah, as the garage was burning,
was on fire
on one side
because they knew our dad had those guns in there, and so they were climbing through the window.
I mean, that forever will be in my mind, watching them do that. Like that was incredible. And I think it just goes to show, and I'm so glad you pointed that out, of how important community is for you in your journey, is to be surrounded by people who will help when anything happens, whether it's big or small, that you know that you can count on them. And it's worth investing in the community. And that's what my parents did. I mean, how many events did we have? Not to get off track here. I shouldn't say events, but how many things did we do with our neighbors? Like we processed chickens with them. We butchered pigs together. I mean, all of that kind of stuff was done in a community.
I remember we would have softball in the field and invite the neighbors. Dad would be the pitcher. He was not a very good pitcher.
My dad was very athletic, but
aggressive.
I think he liked to be in that spot. Most people do. Most people want to be pitchers,
But yeah, and I was just going to go back and say, like, I remember that I was sick that morning. I didn't feel good before this all happened. And I also had our dog Tick in the house with me. And you were like, well, you're going to school. And so I was like, okay, fine. And you said, let Tick out on your way out, because I was going to leave him in the house. And I'm glad that I remember you telling me that, and I let him out. The neighbors grabbed him. He was at the end of the driveway because I'm guessing it was so hot. He was at the end of the driveway and they grabbed him. So it was another way that our community kind of helped out and took care of us. And then I remember after all of this happened, we ended up going to the hotel that Mom played karaoke at. They gave us a room. Dad was there at that point. Dad had come back from where he was working. And so we had spent the night in the hotel room. And I remember Mom waking us up because she had been in Nashville. And so she...
recording an album.
Yeah. And she woke us up and it was very, I mean, that was very sad. And I remember she brought little souvenirs and stuff back, like she had gotten us that she was going to bring back, and that's like all we had. And same thing on community and stuff. I remember I had this blanket. It was a Pocahontas blanket because Pocahontas was so cool. It was like a whole Pocahontas blanket. The neighbor girl had one exact same blanket and she gave it to me.
I remember that. Yeah.
And I still have that blanket somewhere packed away in our stuff. Like, it's just, you don't realize how much you actually lose. And we lost pictures. We used to have albums that I would just go through all the time and just look at pictures.
Like these pictures, we would sit there in the living room and pull them out and just look through them. Like it was an old set, like
Yep.
I don't know. We had so many pictures, but it's like those things that you can't replace. But I think what we learned from this, maybe looking back now, like what I learned from it is how to be resilient, even in those trying times. And it was modeled for us from our parents. I mean, we watched them. I personally remember watching them walk through this, and it was incredibly hard because you deal with insurance. Dealing with insurance is horrible, but we had to go through every single thing that we think we had in our rooms for clothes. If we thought we had 10 pair of pants, we had to like write that down, maybe even the brands if we could remember. I mean, those are not things that normally like we thought about until you had to. And so we watched them go through that, and it was a very trying time. It was financially a hardship for them. And the thing with it is I was graduating in a month. And so my parents I hope I don't get super emotional right here, but my parents were not only dealing with the loss of everything that they had worked for and created that was in their house. And I know that they were so thankful that there was no losses of life. I know that first and foremost. So we're so grateful. But they lost so much. But instead of sitting there and being like, what do we do? Our parents were people of action always. And they got like moving immediately, and they started building the garage back first so that we would have a place to live in.
Thankfully, our dad did construction a lot of his life. So, I mean, that was a good asset to have for him, because then he didn't have to outsource and pay someone else to do it. He did majority of the work or had friends help.
Yeah. I mean, we had family that came and helped, and neighbors and community members that came and put it up. And within a month, I mean, before my graduation, we were moved into that garage, living in it. Okay. I just think of that as all enclosed, and it was fine. It was May, so it wasn't cold in Wisconsin, but we lived in there, and that's how it did. But my parents like worked their butts off to make sure that we had a place of kind of normalcy for me to be able to graduate from and have a graduation party. In the midst of that, our grandpa was battling cancer, and he ended up passing away 6 days before I graduated. So it just felt like that was like two really hard moments in the midst of it.
We have a picture. I think we got it from Grandma Greg, which was his wife, of him. He was at the shop while it was being built, and he was sitting there just watching. And I think he was just talking to Dad. Like, he loved our dad. And so it was just a cool picture to have, because then, he was gone 6 days. Yeah.
Yep. It was a lot of hardness. And again, though, we watched other people, not only our parents, just walk through it. And we're so grateful to see and have had that modeled for us. I think we're all stronger for it as siblings and adults now, and walking through that kind of stuff. But I will tell you, I hope none of you ever have to deal with losing your house, all of that, because it was really rough. But the things I don't remember, and I think it's because my parents were taking this on, probably Dad. I don't remember what happened to our well, because there had to have been water that had to keep going to keep our animals, because we had all of our animals there. And so like all of the things that you don't think of that they did behind the scenes, like I think of now, like they had to make sure that the food was there, that water was working, that they were being fed and taken care of, even though we weren't living there in that, that month between. All right, we need to get past all of those
sad memories.
Yeah, that we had, that we made it through. And I have like a question for you, and then there's a couple parts to it. But the first one is what was your favorite unconventional animal that we ended up having that Dad brought home on the farm?
I would have to say the raccoons that he brought home. Yes. There's like he brought 3 or 4 of them home. I don't know who gave them to him. I don't know how he got them. I don't think you're really supposed to even have raccoons in Wisconsin.
I'm pretty sure not. I mean, someone could fact check us on this, but I'm sure that we were.
I mean, they were friendly.
2 of them were friendly. I know that there was 1 or 2 that were not as friendly, but they're still friendlier than a wild one.
Right. I remember them crawling up our legs and then like sitting on our shoulders and stuff, and like licking your forehead and your hair and stuff, and just like sticking their super cute. I mean, they are really cute, and their little hands. I just love their little hands. I mean, what kind of kid grows up and gets to have some raccoons? And we had them for a while, but then I remember he got nervous about having them because he was worried about rabies. He was worried about them getting rabies, and then transferring obviously to us or other animals.
Like a little old Yeller going on.
Yeah, so we didn't have them for that long, but it was still cool to be able to have them.
Yeah. Do you know one thing that I remember from that is so my dad was like probably the most resourceful person in the whole entire world. And he would go to the grocery stores or there's people that come in and they bring in and fill the shelves with certain kind of foods or whatever. Well, there was like the Twinkie people that he would go and get all of the expired boxes of like Twinkies and I don't know what else, just a bunch of junk food, let's just be honest. And he would bring them home and we would feed the raccoons that as a treat. Like we didn't feed it to them like as the regular food, but they loved Twinkies. The raccoons loved Twinkies. And so then what I also remember about that is it was not only like these expired Twinkies and stuff, but our dad would always go and partner with grocery stores. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because you also did that in North Dakota with him.
Right. Yeah. Dad got into a deal with a grocery store, a local grocery store manager. He had talked to her about getting the produce from them and then also including the bread and stuff like that. And so he got started getting that. And what he would do is he worked as a safety guy. And so he had a work pickup. And so he would go after work. He would pick up the produce and the bread in his work pickup, and he would bring it to us because then we would have to go through it. We'd have to cut the bags open, put the bags in, we didn't want a bunch of garbage. So we would go through it and then we would give it to the animal. We give it to the pigs is what we did. We had 86 butcher pigs at that time. And so we would just sit there and we'd feed them. And I don't want to cry, but I love this. Somehow he accidentally called me on my phone and left me a voicemail, and we're in the middle of a fight. I think Eric threw a tomato at me or something because I scream and I was like, don't throw that at me. And then all you hear is Dad just laughing in the background, ha, 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 like laughing. And it was so awesome that he could do that for us to get us connected with them because then we would go and pick it up too. But also it was awesome to have him there and to be with us and to get to spend that time with him. Because obviously when you're busy working on a ranch with your husband or whatever, you don't get a whole lot of time to spend it with your father. And so like those moments were pretty awesome to have with our dad. Like you kind of take for granted stuff like that. And yes, it was working. We were having to cut open every single stupid bag. And then sometimes it had been sitting outside, so it would be stinky, like tofu and like nastiness. So it wasn't always the funnest, but I enjoyed that time with my dad. And
but it wasn't just that. He also like came over there and helped you castrate piglets. And
Yep.
Stuff
So
like that.
He taught me and Eric how to castrate our own piglets. And I think that was amazing thing for us to learn because that is a very good thing to have on hand to be able to do. Not having to outsource to a vet, not having to have someone else come and do it for you. I don't per se do it. I do the holding of the animals. Eric is the one that does the cutting. I did have to do it once. I'm not for that. Like I always wanted to be a vet, but that's borderline where I might not be able to do it. I can doctor anything, but I don't know about that. I let Eric take care of that, but
I mean, that's just one of like so many skills that were gained just because he had the knowledge and that he was passing on to us. Other things that he did, we talked about it in the last podcast about the hunting and things like that. But what we didn't talk about is what our food looked like sometimes for supper because my dad liked to hunt. So what was your favorite unconventional thing that
I actually liked? That I actually liked or like...
Is there something that you actually...
So I remember that one time Dad was like, I'm going to cook up this cow tongue and you're going to try it. And I was like, that's disgusting. It looks disgusting. I'm not trying it. And he said, you have to try it at least once. And if you don't like it, you don't have to eat it, but you're going to try it. So I remember him boiling the cow tongue, which if you ever see a cow tongue, it is probably one of the grossest things I've ever seen. If you've ever been licked by one, you know exactly how that tongue feels.
Just going to throw this out here while she's going to finish the story is that you should absolutely keep your cow tongue. There are so many amazing recipes. I don't know how he cooked it past the boiling that she's going to talk about. But cow tongue is something that you should keep if you ever have a cow processed.
So he boiled it and that's all I remember is him boiling it. And then he cut it up, put it on a piece of bread, put mustard and mayonnaise on it, and then gave it to me to eat. and it actually wasn't terrible.
Yeah.
It wasn't bad. Would I go out and go get cow tongue and eat it now? Probably not. Would I pick that to make for my family? Probably not. But it was an experience that I had with my father that, I mean, it made me try new things. I didn't hate it. So
Yeah. So that's pretty mild, I would say, compared to some of the other things that we had to eat though. Like we snapping turtles they were very, very there was a lot of them in Wisconsin because of all of the lakes and things like that.
and they'd be crossing the road, and whoever was driving, Javin, Janelle, Mom, whatever, we'd be like, snapping turtle. And then whoever was pulled over, and then someone got out, picked it up, threw it in the trunk or the back of the pickup, whatever we were driving, and then brought it home to Dad. And then Dad would go out and he'd nail the tail to the post. Yep. He'd hang it. Oh, I almost gave everybody a thumbs up. He would nailed the tail to the post, and then he would process them by hanging upside down, because then that way the blood could come out. I just remember there always being tails on every post of the horse's pen.
Just so y'all know, this happened before we moved to the country. We moved to the country when I was in second grade, and this would happen when we lived in the city in like a bigger town. So like we had snapping turtle from a very young age on. It was, I don't want to say it was a delicacy because I don't think I liked it.
Because we were rednecker than everybody.
I think we were resourceful. And I shouldn't say Dad was really resourceful with everything. And that's what will always leave an impression on me. And I think it truly is how we try to live now, eating a little bit more nose to tail and controlling what we're growing and stuff like that, which is such a big part of who we are now. Like on our farm, 100% of our meat comes from our farm or comes from being hunted. And that's a pretty cool thing to throw out there. And I'd encourage everybody to like try to get to that. And if you can't, support your local farmers. Let's just say that.
Absolutely. We back home, back in North Dakota, we raised our own animals. We raised our own pigs. We raised our own beef. We raised our own chickens. Now we had some chickens that we butchered. Pigs, we do raise our own pigs to butcher. But beef, like we used to raise bison, and I love bison meat. Bison meat is one of my favorite meat in the entire world. Janelle absolutely hates it. She thinks it's disgusting and she thinks it's gamey, but it is amazing because there's not a bunch of grease left over when you cook with it. And so that is one of my things that I really miss. Lean. It's very lean. And so right now we have a steer out there that we are feeding out, and we will be processing, and then we will have our own burger again. I have missed having our own burger. If you go to the grocery store and you look at the burger, I feel very underwhelmed by looking at the burger because it does not look like the burger that I am used to. Not just beef, or not just bison, but beef also. Like it does not look like it. And
so growing up, like we ate beef. We raised a few of our own steers. I remember that. But the most of what we ate was venison. We ate so much deer meat growing up. And it was probably why when Hoyt, my 14-year-old, wanted to start hunting, I was like, oh. But I'm going to tell you, I'm so glad we have it in our life again because venison is really good.
I like venison. And we never shot bear in Wisconsin, but Austin just got a bear this year. And so we have been eating the bear. And everybody says
everybody knows Austin is how old?
He is 13.
Okay.
Gonna be 14. 13.
And shot his first bear.
Yeah. He shot his first bear, but I've always heard that bear is not good. Like they say that it's gross. And so we processed it ourselves. I'm not gonna lie, that was probably the most disgusting thing ever.
Why?
There was so much fat. There's so much fat. I called you and I showed you the fat. There was just so much fat. Yeah. And then like the black hairs, there's black hairs, and it just was not amazing to me. But we processed that, and we've been eating that right now until our beef is ready. And so that's what we've been eating. So that's
Do you
nice.
Like it?
I don't mind it, actually.
Okay. Interesting.
I know. I didn't think that I would like it.
Just to come eat some bear.
Yeah, you probably should just come get some bear.
That's so funny.
But yeah, so being resourceful and using what we had in our oh my goodness, on our place in Wisconsin is what Dad made us grow up and be. And so I think it's amazing that we can share this with our children.
Yeah. I think for me now, looking back, I am, again, I'll say this like a zillion times. I'm so grateful for what we experienced growing up because it has helped me and our farm and my family tremendously.
Hmm.
But I think what is like so at the forefront of my mind is making sure that my kids are able to know these skills, to take them no matter what happens, that they will be able to feed themselves if needed. It is time how we're going to always end the show, and that is by asking each other a question that is either off the wall, it can pertain to what we're doing now, it can just be anything, it can be random, and I'm going to start first this week, okay? You ready?
Okay. Yeah, I guess.
All right, here we go. My question for you is, what is something that you hope your kids will take away from how they're being raised now and bring into future generations?
I think sustainability, I mean, being able to take care of themselves and produce food for themselves and not relying on anybody else outside of their family, not saying community. I'm saying community too. I'm saying like government help or whatever else. I
went there.
I did. I went there.
That's all right.
I would rather them know how to take care of things themselves than outsourcing and getting help from outside sources. I want them to be able to feed themselves. I want them to be able to make things. Like Eric is super helpful at learning how to make stuff, and I think that's a very good thing for kids to know how to build things and weld and all of those things that are lost. I mean, a lot of kids don't know anything about that. So I think that's a big thing that I want my kids to carry on, kind of like our dad.
Love that. Yeah. And I think what's really cool is both of our husbands are not only handy in all of those kind of things, but they're also mechanical. Mm-hmm. So like that's our dad was not mechanical. No. He broke more things.
Eric had to fix a bunch of dad's things. Yeah.
Which Ben was so grateful that Eric took that role on. Just so you know.
Yeah.
But with that is like, that's another piece of it that our husbands get to teach our children. And I think that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. I agree. We married some pretty awesome men.
That we did.
Okay. So you ready for my question?
No.
Okay. It's not bad.
Okay.
If you could only eat one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Pizza.
So plain. I thought you would pick something way cooler, but pizza. What kind of pizza?
That's pepperoni is my favorite, but I'll eat any. Okay, I'll take that back. The best meal that I've ever had, which I would love to eat over and over again, was a steak and risotto. And the risotto was made with mascarpone cheese, and it was the best thing. And I need to recreate it. So now I'm hungry, and I'm gonna figure out how to make risotto. I can't. So the reason I'm really excited that I even remembered this right now is like when our cows go fresh in, they have their calves, then we'll be back in milk, and then I can make some mascarpone.
There we go.
So, anyway. All right, so that wraps up our second episode, and this was called Our Roots Run Deep Part 2. So if you haven't listened to that, make sure that you go back and listen to it. We are going to drop a podcast every single week, sharing insight into not only where we came from, but what we're doing now. And we believe that we will bring value to you if you continue to stick with us. We just want to lay the foundation a little bit of who we are and where it came from. And that's going to be weaved like tapestry throughout our stories and how we talk. Next week, we're going to talk about livestock, dead stock on the farm, on the homestead, because everybody's going to go through it. Mm-hmm. Thanks for joining us. Make sure that you hit that follow button. We're now on Instagram, so make sure you go over there. We are called, I didn't even tell Trudi. It's called the Farmstead Revival. You can go find us. That's our handle there. So we'll see you on all of the places.